discussion, and this will be a follow-up on Geoffrey's paper. So I really appreciate Geoffrey's perspective, but we know each other for a while. And of course, we have to bring a social-oriented perspective on technology. And this will be also my contribution today. And as Geoffrey is interested in this kind of very human way of relating to the machines and having a fetishist projection and fetishist relationship about social performance and the hunting stuff on machines. I will call attention to the fact that ruptures, breaks, malfunction, and glitches and bugs and so on, and all that is supposed to be failures in the digital systems can be attributed or allocated a very interesting meaning. And from the human and humanities and social science point of view, and I will try to focus on a series of reflections. Not all of them are my own reflections. I have, of course, completed the relevant literature, and I will introduce a series of venues for understanding a much more, let's say, aesthetic-oriented and politically oriented views on the glitches, malfunction, and so on. Can you please shift to the okay. This is an introduction. So we know that digital systems are supposed to be robust, are supposed to be reliable, are supposed to be resilient when they have problems, and of course, each time there is a failure, we have this long discussion about, okay, security. Okay, I'm trying to evaluate the time, calculate the time of talking, because I'm really talkative, so you have to cut me, but since I don't see you, anyway, I will be my answer session. And so this raises issue in security, cyber security, and the continuity of services. Of course, the safety of users about not only the data, but also the manipulations. And all we know about these issues of security, the more we get digitalized, the more issue in ethics, security, protection of individual rights, and proper private life and so on is raising. But also all that is raised by doing economic and political stability, because of course each time there is a digital failure of a digital system, of course all society is trembling and all society is threatened by the fact that it should be a very have very strong outcomes and impacts. But when I try to collect some information, and there are a lot of publications on the platforms dedicated to social science and technology studies about these failures and this issue of bugs and glitches and so on. Of course, you all people in engineering and in computing studies respect you a lot, because I absolutely don't know how to do that. I'm just a user, but I'm observing from not from afar, but from close up what's happening in the labs and what's happening when you try to make these machines sync and operate. And then you focus on forms. So what's happening, what's exactly a glitch, what's exactly a bug, what's exactly a failure of the system. And of course, the cause and the reasons. So where does it come from and how to cope with this, what will be the solution. So there are, of course, improving software, data management, and so on. So a lot of things have been already done. And this is not my area of specialization. Of course, this is quite the reverse. And I will not dig into this part, but just wanted to introduce this part just to also shift toward the next one, please. As we know, this is a TV broadcast that all started with a big bang, but all starting with a small bang. And we all know that in engineering, robotics and so on, there is the famous, the ghost in the machine, the demo effect. Every time you try to create a situation in which there will be a performance for the digital device, and then there is one risk on two to have a failure, especially when you have people coming from the funding schemes and people who want to make money and raise money for you, or the administration and CNRS, Inria, and to see a new robot, a new computing software, and so on. So there is a chance to have a failure, and this is really, really frightening thing for all people in engineering. But this demo effect is interesting for us in anthropology, but not only in anthropology, but also for social science and humanities, because there is something happening in this regard and in this context that makes a shift in between the reasons why it doesn't work from the meanings it can be allocated to this dysfunction, to this malfunction. And of course, there are very many lexical and semantic variation, okay, bug, glitch, crash, failure, breakdown, and so on. And this is evaluated against the norm of good and bad, wrong and right, functionality and functionality. And this is a lexicon by default, of course, because the system must function. And then each time there is a rupture, then it's supposed to be instability and unreliability and untrustfully, and all the things that are troubling the people that have been devoting time for the computing machine, and of course the future users and the future buyers of the machine. But if we understand failures from another point of view, again, from close up and listening to what's happening and observing the reaction of the people. Sometimes you feel embarrassed, but sometimes this is funny, and sometimes this is sad, and sometimes this is just upsetting a little or upsetting a lot, and there are a long large series or large scope of attitudes towards the failure. And this is interesting because the demo effect, but this is not the only one, is really interesting because it unveils something different regarding the failure. And my suggestion, but this is not new at all, but this is just a way to promote the social sciences and humanities perspective on what you do, guys, in engineering and computing studies and robotics. Why not thinking a bug, outage, glitch, and all the rest otherwise? By excess means that this is something that is full of meaning and not free of meaning and not empty of meaning. And of course, this is interesting to dig into this meaning and to dig into this process, mental and social process, by which you have to fill the gap of meaning for this failure. Next one, please. So we all know that we have all experience. Everyone has an experience of something really strange that happened and it shouldn't happen. And I have many examples. I've just coming back from 3 months, invited professor and ethnographer in China, and I've been recording many situations in which robots are deployed in society. So here the 2 pictures of the service robots, and this was the humanoid marathon in Beijing. This one, thank you. And many, 100 humanoid robots running. And of course, this was really media covered, and many people said, okay, now the robots run very fast and they are higher performance than humans. But most of the robots failed. Actually, 100 on 100, I almost see 30 to 40 robots not running in the right direction, stopping here, falling down the floor, and so on. And there were many strange reactions from the people. Some people were shouting about to the robots, some people were laughing at the robots, some people were telling the robots, okay, get up and then run again, and so on. So this was a really interesting scope of the variety of reaction and the variety of then mental representation and cultural representation besides the failure of the robot. And same for the one for the service robot. This was in the south of Beijing. This is a place where you can invite your kids and for birthday party. And this was a birthday party. There were a lot of kids, and this service robot was running here and there, and they were hitting the tables and hitting the people when he was going back to the starting point, to the starting block. And then it was really strange, but no one paid attention to the failure because it was just in the dynamics of the human agitation around. And of course, we are all witnessing this very strange picture generated by AA system. For instance, this old lady with very strange arms, very long body, and this is absolutely not resembling a real woman, but we have a lot of this experience, right? And this is why it's so interesting. So, this Shrek is really interesting. Can you, Dionysus? Yeah. And can you tell? Okay, thank you. So people have a prompt. A guy have a prompt to ChatGPT and say, "Can you recognize this?" And the response is, "Okay, can you make the a bit up?" Because I cannot see my screen. Yeah. And the response for ChatGPT is, yes, this is the famous AIxHRI art representation of Mona Lisa painting by Leonardo da Vinci. You see that for ChatGPT, Mona Lisa looks like Shrek. So it's really interesting that we see all these failures, and now there are many, many websites, and especially this one on the right, a incident database that is recording all the incident and trying to give, of course, technological solution and technological explanation of that. But also, there are a lot of information that you can cope with and you can deal with to try to understand also the funny or sad or frightening reaction you can have in front of these incidents and so-called incidents. Please. And this is really interesting because this one of the particular and very, very discussed right now in the forefront of the agenda of reflection about the limits of the technology and the black box metaphor that Geoffrey has talked previously, the AA hallucination. So like other technology, AA is supposed to be robust and reliable, but the reliability and robustness is ever increasingly questioned. And there are many, many hallucinations in AA system. And you see these pictures on the right. This is borrowed from one of my articles and one of my papers. I was asking one of the AA text-to-image image generator then, and I just prompted, okay, show me what God is like. God means a religious word, and for this system, God looks like a very, very strange in-between science fiction character and in between horror movie character, and it's coming from in between Jurassic Park and Star Trek, let's say, and hybrid in between the two. So this is really interesting that this kind of hallucination raise the issue of how the models are trained, representation they would render, and so on. But computer scientists, and all the engineers and people dealing with these aspects are trying to solve the issue and said, okay, what's wrong with that? But us users, we are facing this problem of opacity, this problem of transparency. Again, as Geoffrey raised up, we don't understand exactly what's happening inside, but we have the result, we have the product. And what do we think about that? What is happening? Am I hallucinating, or is it the system which is hallucinating? And the issue of hallucination is also a conceptual debate, because hallucination, they say, okay, there are a lot of works now conducted on the issue of hallucination in artificial intelligence, but a clear distinction has been made in between the trouble in perception, this is a human side of hallucination, and the trouble in production, this is the software, or this is the computing side. And both of them are not equal, but both of them are labeled hallucination. And that's why we have to be prudent, and we have to, let's say, tackle the issue in very prudent terms and very precise terms. But hallucination, don't forget that the history of humanity is also a certain way to domesticate hallucination. Think about the way in many thousand years of human civilization, how many situations and how many devices and techniques have we created in order to generate hallucination among the people, for instance, ideological manipulation and drug use and trance and all these techniques that are bringing hallucination. So hallucination is not something that we are trying to leave aside or expel from our human experience, but the history of civilization is also a certain way to cope with hallucination and even make hallucination something culturally significant. But okay, for most of the people dealing with the issue of failure, there are many dangers of outcomes. And of course, this is absolutely not my intention, and this is not the intention, I believe, of social sciences and humanities to say that, okay, all these outcomes and all the impacts are not really important. We have to focus on the meaning. We have to focus on the experts. No, no, no. This is a reality. There are many, many outcomes and many threats in technological terms and economical terms and social terms, psychological terms and security terms and so on. So I just raised up a series of images just to show you that people are thinking about the deepness and the bad effects of these failures. And this is a loss of time, this is a loss of energy, this is a loss of economic power, this is a loss of efficiency. And of course, if we live in a society where rationality and efficiency and economic production is central as modern society like the one we live in, and then, of course, failure are really, really a bad thing and a bad signal for society. So that's why this is really important to cope with this. But on the cultural and social side, this is also important not to leave aside all the imagination and all the cultural representation brought about by these failures. This next one. Because also these failures are located very strange, meaning they are grotesque, they are weird, and they are threats to humanity and to society. So we have to focus on the impact of the user side, whatever the digital literacy. This is also interesting to see that even the people very specialized in computing have also the same reaction for ordinary user about these failures and about the system breakout. So on the side of the psychological science, then experience and perception raise issue in trust and reliability, and Geoffrey has underscored this point. But also for social sciences, I want you to stay and come back as much as I can on this topic, on this aspect. We also have to think about the way existing norms and cultural frameworks and the mainstream ideologies or symbolism help us to conceive, to codify, and to express a very specific meaning for these failures. For instance, this is really important to consider the cultural variations depending on the country and depending, of course, on the device. But for the same device, if you record different situations in which, for instance, in India, in South America, or in the north of China, for instance, in the rural and the urban context, for aging people or for teenagers, there are a lot of factors of variation, and people do not exactly allocate the same meaning to the failures of the system, the failures of the smartphone application or the robot reaction. And this is really important to take this into account, and also not to stay on the psychological side of the theory, but also to explore the cultural side and say, okay, what will you use as symbols and as cultural representation to allocate meaning to these very strange and because AI generative systems make, for instance, not only AI generative, but robots are grotesque, means that they are generating fun and generative comic situation. The falling robots, you know that, yeah, we have a lot of example. I show you the one I observed, but I observed a lot of robots falling actually. But it's really easy to have a video capsule on the internet and on the social networks and platforms to see that these robots in kitchens are becoming crazy and are making very strange things, and they are hitting people and they are running here and there. So these funny fails and also these records of the when AI goes wrong are waiting. Platform are replete with this example, but this is a rupture of reality, and I'm calling to Bergson theories of what the comic is. And the French philosopher Bergson in the early 20th century said that, okay, the comics from the rupture of reality, when you see someone walking in the streets and then he fall down and you did not expect him or her to fall down, then you are inclined to laugh, you are inclined to see the situation as comical. Of course, if he doesn't kill himself, so this makes very different situation. But every time that our brain and our perception is threatened by a rupture of reality, a rupture of sense, a rupture of meaning, then you can be threatened and you can be frightened, but also you can have fun of this situation. And of course, digital and technological fails are not the only one. There are many, many human fails, and on the same platforms, you can see the human fails and digital fails. So I'm not pretty sure, but this is something that we can discuss, that there is something very specific to the digital fails. I mean that human brain and human attitudes toward fail is something that can apply to whatever situation, organic agents like humans and digital agents like robot avatars and the chatbots. And of course, the outage, no, not yet. The outage is weird, is creating weird situation. And Freud again, and the uncanny is something that you already, maybe you already know. So this is my 3F theory that I'm trying to frame in these years of working on the magic of technology. The familiarity means fears and fascination at the same time. But this is another story. Yeah, please. So, technological meaning, ruptures in meaning, process reinvention of meaning, and of course the venues in anthropology is how do we allocate meanings to failures and breakdown. I explained a lot of things previously. And of course, the challenge is the issue of coherence and rationality. And we have to go beyond the black box metaphor because, you know, in social science and technology studies, the issue of explicability is something that comes into arena and much discussed at the time. But there are brand new works that have been conducted by philosophers of technology now tackling the issue of the different explication repertoires. I mean, that explicability is, okay, there is one failure and there are a series of reasons and we have relevantly and coherently pick up the good solution for the good problem, for the corresponding problem. But now we take into account, and Macmillan and Mussolesi, sorry, are this new generation of researchers that are trying to take into account the fact that you can also have a sedimentation of different repertoire and not only a rational one. And there is irrationality in human-machine relationship and irrationality of AA and in AA that is also striking because it's really important. And irrationality is even becoming a leverage of appropriation in many situations, and there are several studies in this regard. In many situations, when you don't understand why the machine functions very well or does not function very well, then the inexplicability and the very irrational logics underlying makes you much more inclined to appropriate the technology. So this is a brand new field, and I find it, of course, fascinating because it's recalling that us humans, we have complex mind and complex ways of coping with technology. So allocating meaning, I'm not, of course, the first one to think about this, and I will try to now introduce a series of authors and theoretical models. And outage is a key and a cue to socio-technical and socio-technological system functionalities and morphologies. Pfaffenberger was he is an anthropologist. He is the authors of what we call socio-technical systems, in which we have to take into account the human factors, social factors, economic factors, and of course technical factors at the same time as the wrong system. You don't have the social system on the one side and the technological system on the other one. But we have to tackle the issue of complexity of the intermingling in between social, cultural, psychological, ideological, political, and of course technological factors in the same time. So that's why we favor the concept of social, technical, and social technological systems. And of course, Gilbert Simondon, who is a very famous philosopher of technology, now he's unearthed because he disappeared from the landscape of reflection about technology, but now he's coming back at the forefront, and he's interesting because he framed the concept of mode of existence, just like technology, where as, this is a metaphor, as organic agents, and they have a very specific way in a philosophical and even phenomenological terms, way of existing in our human ecosystem. But no, get back. No, outage is an invariant of history of techniques and in general, and then this is an homage to the late Nicolas Dova, who was a friend of several of us today, and he edited a special issue of Technique et Culture in 2019 on the en cas de panne, in case of outage. And please have a look at this, because this is really interesting collection of essays explaining that finally, when you see from a historian and sociological perspective, then outage is not something out of the system, something out of the history, but this is a key issue of the history. This is not an incident, but this is a driver for technological innovation. And this is something that have been demonstrated previous centuries, technology as well, for high tech. Now we can shift to the next one. And so this is my field of interest and my field of investigation. This is even a kind of magic. After fetishism, then you have magic. So because digital features break down with user expectation, and it's a breach in coherence in a very specific moment where everything is suspended. So what's happening? I don't have exactly the resources, mental resources, and the explanation to fill the gap of what's happening right now. And this is what Emmanuel Grimaud calls the ontological, and not ontological, but ontological confusion. And this paves the way to what we call magical thinking. Magical thinking is nothing else than a rational but alternative way of thinking how machine operates, but not in a rationalist way. It means that, okay, it works, but you don't know exactly how it works, and you will create your own logical segmentation and logical process by which it works. And said, okay, you can anthropomorphize the machine and say, okay, he or she wants to do like that, or he or she has a very specific attitude, and so on. So it means that we don't shift toward irrationality, but we have to shift toward alternative rationalities for explaining the way humans think about the failures of the systems and of the machine. Of course, this raises the issue of anthropological theories of magic, and there is something really interesting, and I will just devote one couple of seconds to that. In one of the leading anthropologists in the theory of magic is James Charles Fraser, and he framed the concept of échec magique, means the magical failure. And he explained that this is not because in magic something fails that people do not believe. Quite the reverse. The failure in magic, for instance, in a ritual to call the rain, and the ritual to kill the enemy, and the ritual to have a better harvest, or the cattle goes fine. If it doesn't work, this is not the fault of the magician. This is not the fault of the supernatural power. This is just because the ritual failed, and another ritual make it. So the robustness of the magic system is also relying upon the possibility of a failure. And this brings together what's happening with technological digital systems and magical systems of ancient times. So that's why we have to shift from technolexicon to social cultural semantics. And the glitch is really interesting, because a lot of discussion regarding this very strange concept, a very famous failure, and Meunier, Cardon, and other authors have been tackling the issue of why when algorithms tremble, quand les algorithmes tremblent, this is the title of the paper published in 2019, a collective paper, in which they try to broaden the scope and say, okay, a technological explanation of why the algorithm produce glitches is not enough, and we have to cope with human imagination. Because for the authors, Meunier, Cardon, and the rest, this is really important for the human mind to rebalance the relationship with machine. And for this author, coping with the glitch and domesticating the glitch is a certain way to get power against the machine, to regain power. And from then, glitch has become not an objective explanation, but a creative event, and it can be a creative way of producing art and music. And let's shift to the next one. And this is interesting because from the failure of the system up to the very specific domain of glitch art, there is a gap and a bridge that have been very happily been bypassed, let's say. And from the heart of glitches and the glitches for heart, this is what Fitzpatrick called the aesthetics. Oh, this is a correct spelling. Anyway, the aesthetics of imperfection. Glitch art is, in French, l'esthétisation des erreurs analogiques ou numériques comme des artefacts ou des bugs par corruption de code ou de données. This is intentional. This is not an accident. This is not an incident. They produce glitches just to create a situation in which you have the sense of aesthetics, in which you can also raise your imagination and create what we call the techno-aestheticism, bypassing the logics of rationalism and calculations. Ormonto, Montembeau, and so on have been publishing a lot of what they call the corrupt machine. And the art glitches as a certain way, again, to regain control over the machine. The aesthetic is a certain way to be much human that the machine could be. And then a brand new field has opened, what they call it, the glitch epistemologies. How to make sense to the glitch. And thinking about technological breakdown at large, consider both digital computing, programming, accident, also the social and political meanings. And we witness an extension of the term of glitch, also the emerging glitch epistemology. And glitch has become a general category far beyond the digital system. Then we turn system into, let's say, something that must fail to unveil the way they function. And Rosa Mencken have written a glitch manifesto in which we have to recognize the imperfection of data, imperfection of devices, imperfection of computing systems and programs, and of course, the imperfection of use and users. Because this is a certain way, just like Haraway did it for the Cyborg Manifesto, to counterbalance the dominant and quote, dominant continuing search for a noiseless channel has been and will always be more than a regrettable, ill-fated dogma. And then glitch has become a tool for power, empowerment. And the emerging glitchy studies are not thinking in terms of misuse, but in terms of diversions. Now we have to manage the use of glitches as a tool to, let's say, contradict and to gain power again against the mainstream ideology and the mainstream economical and technological system, and then the mainstream digital capitalistic power. So it has become a tool for resistance and empowerment, especially in the feminist and post-colonial approach. So there are a lot of papers and a lot of books now claiming for the virtues of the glitch and the political economy of the bug. After Paul Virilio is a famous philosopher, seminal work on the aesthetic of outage. Then we think about the poetics and the politics of outage. So the slogan is, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And there are political economy of digital games as tool for resistance. And okay, the éloge du bug, archéologie du glitch, and so on. So many essays that are witnessing a shift from failure to resistance time and again. And the glitch and the bug have both become, and also work for the rest, as an epitome of freedom. Means that this is a resistance of the systems by itself in technological terms. And then this is a certain way to make humans more in control of the technological system, where the technological system is now to appraise and to colonize our societies and life. But to what extent can we challenge these technocentric views? Of course, do not take it wrong. I'm not saying that, of course, all these people are right, but they are not wrong. But we have to also contextualize, because anthropology, and Geoffrey will also, I think, and Lucy also both elaborate also on this topic. But, social sciences and anthropology are sciences of contextualization. We have to think events, even technological or technique events, in their cultural, historical, and social. Of course, then these developments are well located in the limited scope of reinventing the glitch, the outage, and the bug in the cultural avant-garde. This is a fetish, but I'm not sure this is a certain way to revolutionize all the digital capitalism system and so on. In heavily digitized societies, bugs and glitches remain problems. And of course, in technocentric views, technology is the driver, society is the target, and in social views, we have to understand the inner logic of technological systems. But my problem is that when you people from technology and engineering and computing, I said you, but not you in the room, but this is addressed to all the people that are clearly specialized in technology. As goes the literature right now, when you are looking for a theory of systems, you borrow systems in biology. And technological systems look like a biological one. You know, it works like molecules and ecosystem. Even the word of ecosystem is borrowed to biology. But why not taking the reference of social sciences and social systems, for instance? Because, of course, I told you already that we have a definition of social technological systems. And the logic of social systems can also be applied to technological ones, of course, to a certain extent only. Of course, anthropological perspective, pay attention to the human behavior in context. I already said that, but I will go very, very fast to the point. Anthropologists have been studying not only the structural aspect of social systems, what makes human institution and human relationships stable in time and stable across a group, even large one. Of course, kinship, of course, social organization, of course, political institution, and so on, are the framework for living together for a long time. But also, anthropologists have been interested in the instability in these systems, and there are revolution, crisis, transition, rupture, violence, and many, many ruptures in social systems. We have a very famous anthropologist, Georges Ballandier, who was specialized in the disorder and chaotic events. And for him, this is really interesting because the chaos is not a bad things, as seen from the historical and anthropological point of view, of course, not from a personal one, because if you live chaos in your life, of course, you will be very disappointed. Yet, for Ballandier, chaos is always a situation in which the system is challenged by historical events and a very specific situation, and it will get back to a certain extent to a reproduction of its structure after rearranging, after adapting to the new situation. And this has nothing to do with biology. This is only human and social ways of having systems, means that people living together and people interacting with their material environment and people creating technique to mediate the relationship towards the environment. And since bugs and glitches and outage are produced similarly by technological systems, then why not giving a try to analogy not to biological system but to social system. This is just a door that I'm trying to open today, but I don't have a clear response to that. So please don't. You can address me questions regarding, but I don't have a response now. This is not just an open reflections. Next one, please. Since, of course, there is an issue of scaling, to what extent then the fragility of digital system make the social system vulnerable? And of course, people from technology have tackled the issue of complexity. This is not because there is a very small and circumscribed and very specific bug and glitch in one given system that the whole world is collapsing. But we have to think about the impacts and the way they spread within the system and the way they are threats to the overall social technological system. Complexity makes the world fragile, say people from the, okay, I don't see my screen anymore. Dionys, I don't see the screen, but anyway. Okay, thank you. Complexity makes the world fragile, of course, but this is an issue of scaling, and this is a report of the International Telecommunication Union, and I underscore in red the important elements of the reflection, and said, okay, the same architecture, tightly coupled, deeply interdependent, optimized for efficiency, blah, 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 can create conditions with a sufficiently large initial shock. Means that we have to scale and we have to take into account the different impacts and different systems. So not all the failures are threatening the same way the stability of social systems. And then final reflections. When mistakes lay ground to human-like complexity. So we are perfectible humans. And Besnier, who is a French philosopher, said, okay, we do not have to robotize ourselves. We are not robots. We do not look like rational, efficient, and optimized machines. We are not machines. And so he laments the fact that studying robots leads us to think us as robots, and robots are better than us because they can comply with the situation in which they have to task and be efficient in a given situation. Yet, by ricochet, AI and robots do their best. Robots engineers do their best to make machines more humans. This is the challenge, and of course, the imagination of the 21st century. But if errare humanum est, my proposition is why not errare machinum est? Because finally, if we get back to Nietzsche, we think that, okay, we are not perfect. The machines are not perfect. And if the machines are not perfect and fail, then we can have a closest relation to machine because they resemble us. And there are a lot of fun stuff on the internet. If AI hallucinations are bad, are human hallucinations good? Coupling with tackling the issues of who has the best hallucination and what's the best in between the machine and the humans. But I just pick up this article from Le Monde, les hallucinations, ces erreurs de l'IA qui rendent la machine trop humaine. And now we are thinking the complexity of perfectibility of human and perfectibility of machine, saying, okay, failure will be something that we cannot escape. And then human failure and digital failure equal. So maybe, and this is an opening ground right now, in both science and technology studies and social sciences studies in technology, that the failure may be much more fruitful key and event and element to think with to make machine much more closer that we are from them. And the next one is a conclusion to the conclusion, but I don't need to elaborate that much because this is just a recapture of the element. Denis, the next one, yeah. So we shift from failure to feature. We are changing meanings by default to by excess of creativity. And then failure, bug, glitch is not a cyber junk, but can lead to cyberpunk, thanks to glitch art. And the challenge will be the way we understand the complexity of systems, including their failure. Thank you so much. I ended up in exactly 42 minutes.